ask me a question, Dr. Galina, did you have a mammogram in your life? No. Why? Because I know that there is a much better test.
You know, I love what I do. I hate breast cancer.
How much radiation do women get from mammograms?
At least the amount of 100 chest x-rays.
In the United States and around the world, currently mammography is the standard screening tool.
I'm a doctor of nuclear medicine. We don't like mammography as it is harmful.
Would you stand there and hit the button 100 times? Nobody would do that.
Mammography is a suboptimal test.
It's the standard of care. So it's what we do.
It misses cancers that we wish it would find.
Half of all cancers that actually exist.
It finds some cancers that we call overdiagnosis cancers.
And then it's going to give all these false positives, say that you have cancer if you don't.
Those are cancers that we wish it didn't find because those cancers don't need to be cured.
Leading to stress, anxiety, fear, maybe the biopsy. I mean, this is just a nightmare here.
Is mammography truly early detection?
It's supposed to be. That's what it's supposed to do.
No, of course not late detection.
People don't understand cancer, or they wouldn't do what the doctors are asking them to do. So by the time you have a 1 centimeter tumor, that's 1 billion cells. Tumor is gone for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and is encapsulating.
Mammogram cannot see that process until there is a mass, and that's already 7 years process.
Mammograms are not early detection, not early detection, not early detection, not early detection.
Look at the camera. Look at the camera.
Good girl.
I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. 5-year survival is like 2%. And that's if you take the chemo and the radiation. And I thought, well, that's not a very good option. Then I decided, no, I'm not going to do any of that. And that brings my chance of survival to basically less than a year or a few months. But as you can see, 2 years have elapsed and I'm still here. I took matters into my own hands. I did research. I looked at different alternatives and changed my life dramatically. Even the doctors were very impressed. Hey! That within 6 months, my tumor had shrunk in half, and all the other tumors in my lungs and my sternum, everywhere, were gone. Completely disappeared. The biopsy that they did and all the mammograms that followed the biopsy, they made it spread more.
The argument has always been, well, if you find something, then it requires a biopsy.
The area where they did the biopsy, eventually a tumor came out there.
Another tumor? Did they invent FNA because of the problems with seeding from biopsy?
Well, the seeding from biopsy has never been proven to be a, there have been many studies that look at it. And the thought was that if you're putting the needle in and taking the needle out, putting the needle and taking it out, that you can seed the the edge of the incision. The kind of biopsy that I do, which is vacuum assisted, the device goes in, it stays in, the cores come back through so they don't touch the skin as you pull it out. You put the marker in and you close the hatch of the biopsy device. So when you take it out, that whole area that was there is covered up.
The biopsy spreads it. So you got 1 billion cells, you're taking a needle and driving it through 1 billion cells 5 or 10 times. So now you're cutting across veins and lymphs, blowing through the cancer, going out the other side, spreading cells, dragging cells back through. Now you've just spread the cancer. So I call biopsies the kiss of death.
I also do not recommend biopsy anymore, as also you sprayed the cancer cells.
There's a caveat there if that's a single tumor. If there's already other tumors, it's already spread, okay, take a piece of it, know what you're looking at.
There's never been any proof of seeding, at least statistical proof that it happens.
Was it Will Rogers that says there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, the worst kind of lie?
Another issue with mammogram, if there is a cancerous condition by smashing a breast,
will send out metastasis.
The idea of getting it squeezed between a couple of plates so that you can get a couple of pictures. Well, first of all, just squeezing it, you're creating an inflammatory change. Poking it enough times would create an inflammatory change.
You should not give a trauma to any cancer. The risk to spread the tumor,
it can spread cancer.
this risk is high.
You do a biopsy on a tumor and then you compress it with the mammogram.
It's going to squeeze out of that little hole now, isn't it? Doesn't that just make all the sense in the world? If we've got a little cancerous lesion and we poke a hole in it so that we can get some tissue, now it's got a hole in it. Now you agitated it. So then we go back and then we squeeze that area. Does that make any sense whatsoever? No, it really doesn't. So I think, come on, colleagues, let's get back to having practical sense.
I worked together with the radiologists and I looked at the mammography results every day. And I saw after biopsy and after surgery how often the results were wrong.
All the unnecessary breast amputations from false positives.
I see a lot of patients after they did a mammogram. And personally, I see a lot of mistakes. I see that some mammograms are false positive and some of them are false negative.
The accuracy is not high, as there are so many false negative and false positive results, which always are very harmful to the patient.
You can line up 10 radiologists and you can show them all the same film. And chances are you're going to get 10 different opinions.
There's no one perfect diagnostic test, but the best screening tool we have in the year 2019 is mammography.
There's massive overdiagnosis of cancer.
I felt a lump on my breast that I hadn't felt before, so I thought I'd better check it out.
Did you have an MRI?
It was just the regular thing they do when they...
Mammogram?
Mammogram. They did a biopsy. It showed there was no malignancy, and he said, yes, it's coming back not malignant, but it's very unusual for a person your age to have a fast-growing tumor like that, so we need to take it out.
Well, the gold standard is to take a piece of tissue, look at it under a microscope, because I can see something on a mammogram, I can see something on an ultrasound, but we always call the pathologist the Monday morning quarterback because they do get the last say. They get to look at the tissue to say, is this something that is harmful?
But the doctor, when I got there for the surgery, he said that he had looked at the cells under the microscope and he he thought it was malignant, so they were going to do a partial mastectomy. Then when they came back, it showed no malignancy. Thought it was a little strange. He said, I know you're happy, but it was all a mistake. I was happy that it was a mistake.
Was he saying that he shouldn't have done the partial mastectomy?
I guess so.
He didn't get specific.
No, he did not.
Is that him calling?
No.
How accurate are biopsies for breast cancer? Are they 100% or where is the figure for that?
So it depends who's doing it and what method you do it by. I do what we call vacuum-assisted core biopsies. They're incredibly accurate and incredibly sensitive.
And I saw after biopsy and after surgery how often the results were wrong.
So that was my experience.
Core biopsy is the standard of care, whether it's a vacuum-assisted or a true cut. It's the standard of care to make a diagnosis, and it's incredibly accurate.
The accuracy of the biopsy is far from 100%, as when the pathologist looks on the tissue under his microscope, there is nobody who controls him. He can say cancer, no cancer, or maybe cancer, but it is only his opinion.
If you don't follow the rules, somebody's going to get hurt somewhere along the way.
I think it's always a good idea to get a second opinion.
If you don't like your first diagnosis, get a second diagnosis or a third. Make sure that you've really got cancer.
Biopsy is no gold standard.
Have you ever been told you have dense breasts?
Yes.
Yes.
No. Yes. No.
Have you had a mammogram?
Yes.
How many?
3.
Hi, have you ever been told that you have dense breasts?
No.
Have you ever had a mammogram?
No.
You are Dr. Beth Dupree?
Yes, I am Dr. Beth Dupree.
You say Dupree?
Dupree, yep.
Okay.
Medical Director of the Oncology Service Line for Northern Arizona Healthcare. Wow. About 40 to 50% of the population is at least moderately dense. You might have heard of Nancy Capella. Nancy had a normal mammogram but was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer within months after her mammogram because her breasts were so dense. You can't find the polar bear in the snowstorm until he opens his eyes. And that's the way her cancer was. It was a polar bear in the snowstorm.
Whistle while we work, la da 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 da. Fresh tuna fish just caught this morning in the can.
15 years ago, my wife Nancy was diagnosed with stage 3C, late stage breast cancer. This was after 10 years of normal mammograms. 13 out of 18 lymph nodes cancer. Her doctor felt a ridge on her breast. Her physician said, "Why don't you go get a mammogram?" And Nancy said, "Well, I just got a mammogram." And she says, "Go get another one." Her tumor was hidden because she has dense breast tissue, which she was never told. And when you have extremely dense breast tissue, a mammogram is less than 50% accurate. So if you knew that your mammogram was going to be less than 50% accurate, would you bank 100% upon it? No, you wouldn't. So she went and got another mammogram, which showed she was perfectly fine. Immediately upon receiving the ultrasound, Nancy found out that she has a 3.5 centimeter tumor in her breast that had been growing there for quite some time. We were upset that she did not have this information about breast density for 11 years, actually, when she was going for mammograms. Her physician did not tell her about dense breast tissue. There's 4 degrees of density. Nancy had the highest degree, extremely dense tissue. We find this information out long after the horses left the barn. And now what do? We found a number of studies. I contacted Dr. Thomas Kolb, a radiologist in New York City, because he wrote one of the studies. Dr. Kolb tried to make an issue of and bring to the public dense breast tissue, and people weren't listening at the time. Nancy and I did this together, but Nancy was the face and the voice of Are You Dense? It was an amazing thing to watch. From our 3rd bedroom, we are assembling an organization and a network around the United States that are getting behind what we thought was an injustice to women. We just saw it begin to explode. 15 years ago, we went to Hartford, Connecticut, and we went to the legislator. We want to make a law that says you must tell patients about their breast density and the ramifications of that. We passed the first law in the nation for breast density notification. If your physician never told you that you have extremely dense breast tissue, it's a matter of life and death to you. A physician must tell the patient that she's got dense breast tissue. And there are other options for screening, such as an ultrasound or an MRI. If you have fatty tissue in your breasts, then a mammogram is fine. But if you have fatty tissue with dense tissue or straight dense tissue like my wife Nancy had, you need an ultrasound. And don't let anybody talk you out of it. Believe me, radiologists have known all along that breast density is a problem, and no one wanted to tackle it. We did. I can tell you this for a fact. We only had support from ACS and Komen on a state level, and not all states. They were neutral on all of our national efforts, neutral, until the chips were down. They knew we were going to have a law through the FDA, and no one wants to be on the wrong side of a breast cancer bill. We went into this battle with all the armor we had, and the truth wins out, and goodness wins out. And with faith in God, we kept moving forward, and we felt that we were right. So we've got 38 states with dense breast tissue notification legislation, which is an amazing feat. We felt it a natural progression to go for a national law. When Senator Feinstein got involved, it was a shot in the arm, and we knew something was going to happen. It did happen most recently this past March. The federal legislation goes a little step further. They changed the MQSA. In doing so, they changed how mammography is reported, which is really good. because mammography was never updated in over 20 years of this MQSA. Women who were patients who had the same story as Nancy, that they had breast density, their tumor was not found, they have late-stage diagnosis, they're really mad, and they want to do something about it.
My name is Suzanne, and Suzanne McDonald. I had a mammogram back in 2007. Got the results back, everything was fine, but I said, something doesn't feel right, and it hurt a lot. And her response to me was, well, cancer doesn't hurt. When I went in to have my ultrasound done, she came in and just ultrasounded my breast and kind of basically walked out quickly, and then came back in and said, we would like for you to have another mammogram on the spot. So kind of got a little worried. They actually took me into the room and let me see the films the doctor did, the radiologist. And it was like a little pinhead against all this white that you can see like a little star in the sky somewhere. I had an MRI and my cancer was over 3 centimeters, and I ended up having stage 3C breast cancer within a month of having a mammogram. I'm triple positive, and it's a scary thing. And so a lot of people, you see it coming back again and again. And early diagnosis is so important to not having to go through all the treatment and the pain.
It's very important to know your breast density. It is one of the strongest predictors of the failure of mammography, is to have dense breast tissue. Plus, in itself, is the highest risk factor, higher than first-degree relatives. So, is breast density important to know about? You better believe it is. So we had a lot of pushback in this process of trying to see legislation move. And we got most of our pushback, much of it, through the organization of the obstetrician and gynecologists. They would never admit that they're against anything. They just were neutral on things.
Why do you think that was so?
The status quo is good enough. In our opinion, the status quo is just not good enough. The referring physician is normally the gynecologist. So the gynecologist gets a report from the radiologist, and the gynecologist knows from the report that you've got dense breast tissue and how dense it is. Gynecologist then makes the decision whether to pursue that or not tell the patient. But there is a decision to make. The responsibility lies with the gynecologist. So the gynecologist is at fault here. I hate to think about it, but every time I do, I think of her gynecologist who kept telling her, you're fine, no change from last year, and you read this crap, and you just say, there's no reason for that. It's just as simple to be honest with a patient as it is to be dishonest. Why don't you be honest? This is documentation from, it's actually a report from my wife's mammograms from the radiologist to the gynecologist, the referring doctor. There is a discrete 5 or 6 millimeter nodule in the superior aspect of the right breast. This is unchanged from previous studies. The breasts are extremely dense and nodular in appearance. Now comes the happy gram. Dear Ms. Capello, thank you for your recent visit to our facility. We are pleased to inform you that the results of your mammogram are normal. Everything is normal with a 2.5 centimeter tumor in her breast. That's what we're dealing with. So our message to the world is be educated about your breast density and eat right, do the right things, but make sure your tests are the proper tests for you, and talk to your physician. And that's all I have to say about that.
My baseline mammogram, polar bear in the snowstorm, white out. 10 years ago, I was opening a hospital in Bensalem, a breast cancer hospital. And we had gotten some new technology and pathology that my pathologist said, we're going to be able to give you quick reads within a couple hours. Because everybody's anxiety comes from when the biopsy's done to you know. Well, I had my mammogram in February, clear. Not even 12 weeks later, I'm in the shower and I felt a lump in my breast. 10 o'clock at night, not a good time to do a breast exam. I'm just letting do your breast exam in the morning when offices are open. And I felt this lump in my breast and I was sick to my stomach because it was behind my nipple, high up, and it was rock hard. And I was like, oh my God, isn't this like a bite in the butt? So I did what every self-respecting breast surgeon would do. I went in the morning early and I got on the thing and I scanned myself. And I'm ultrasounding me and I'm looking on the ultrasound. I'm like, and I was sick because it was a solid lesion. So I got a biopsy at lunchtime. I thought this was going to be great. We just bought this pathology machine. I'm going to know before I go home. This is wonderful. And, 4 o'clock, the pathologist says, well, I can't tell you for sure. I go, are you freaking kidding me? It turned out it was a proliferative lesion called PASH, or pseudoangiomatous stromal hyperplasia, which is not cancer, but it's very proliferative. It kind of came up out of nowhere. My breasts are dense. It didn't show up on my mammogram, but it did show up on my ultrasound.
The thing I'd like to focus on is we need a better test. There are always going to be women who get a mammogram and are diagnosed with breast cancer 6 months after a normal mammogram. We need a better test.
Dense-breasted women need to have an adjunct to mammography to be able to identify whether or not they have something abnormal. Because if you look at a mammogram, if you have a lesion and you have dense and they're one in front of the other, the lesion's going to be obscured by the density. So that's why we use whole breast ultrasound for an adjunct to screening mammography. It's like the cone of silence. You put the pad down over the breast and it rolls back and forth, and you get to see the topographical outlines of the breast tissue.
How many places offer these whole breast ultrasound?
Not enough.
Have you ever been told that you have dense breasts?
Yes.
Did they explain what that does to the mammogram?
No.
You just have lots more calcium, I think.
I've been told that I need to have more mammograms than other people.
Do you know what it means to have dense breasts?
Yes.
What does it mean?
It means you have lots of fiber in your breasts.
How does it affect the mammogram?
It doesn't show the details.
Aren't you smarty pants?
It's because I've been through the mill.
Are we overdiagnosing cancer overall and thus overtreating?
In certain diseases where we do screening, we are doing overdiagnosis. Somewhere between 10 and 40%, I think 20, of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer through screening. The tumors would never grow, never metastasize, never bother them. Think of it as, yes, they have cancer, but God's great plan is they're going to grow old and die of something totally unrelated if we didn't tell them they have it and treat it.
It overdiagnoses.
It overdiagnoses, exactly. That's part of the problem.
And then they amputate the breast, and then all this surgery that wasn't going to lead to their death in the first place.
Hi, how are you today? Good.
If you've got DCIS, that's a difficult one as to what you might do with it.
Ductal carcinoma in situ.
Ductal carcinoma in situ.
It's a precancer. This is not a tumor. It's just odd cells in the ducts in the breast. The first round was in 2000. From a mammogram, they found calcifications. They did a biopsy and it said I had DCIS. So then I had the mastectomy. The second one I had in 2014, and it was the same procedure, mastectomy on the other side. So now I'm even.
You might do standard treatments, lumpectomy and all the rest of it, or do you do X, Y, and Z, which would lead the patient to excessive treatment?
I was skeptical, but they insisted that it needed to be removed. They took the whole breast on both sides.
My mom, when she was in, I believe, her mid-70s, she was diagnosed with cancer of the breast. So I agreed and spoke with her doc that we would do maybe 2 courses of radiation out of the 8 to 16 or something that they had recommended. We agreed to do 2. We agreed to having a couple of the lymphatics removed, but not the entire lymphatic chain. Come to find out, as you read the morphology more and more, you found out that this particular type of tumor was an extremely slow-growing tumor. So we, in turn, gave it the name her ex-husband, because we knew that it was him.
Do you see a lot of breast cancer?
Yes, we do.
Do you think that it's being overdiagnosed?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Hippocrates said, in unseen cancers, it is better to give no treatment at all, for treatment leads to early death. So this isn't new. Hippocrates knew this thousands of years ago.
DCIS is not a cancer that is taking over. It's benign, actually.
The fact that there are some cancers that don't need to be cured is alarming to some people, but unfortunately it is an entity that exists.
I think we're going to get about a 50% increase by 2030. So we're going to, instead of seeing 240,000 breast cancers a year, it's going to be like 360,000.
You only can see it on the mammogram. My aunties lived to 96, 97, and they didn't have, nobody had cancer. They didn't have mammograms. So you don't know. It's stage 0 when you get technical about it.
Give it a new name, give it a new number, and you can impress people in a new way. It's not staged at the in situ level.
Do they call it stage 0? Do you remember that?
No, they actually, I believe, called it stage 1, and it wasn't 1. It's in situ, thereby no such thing as spreading. It hadn't spread.
They didn't say one of the things you can do is watch and wait.
They did not say that. They did not say that, no. It is questionable about whether it ever develops into anything more invasive than the zero DCIS.
So they haven't confirmed that it ever spreads?
I don't know. But I know there are discussions now about whether this really does develop into an active carcinoma. Every once in a while I read something about, well, is it really necessary to do a mastectomy?
The whole idea is, if we identify it, is to treat the patient appropriately, not overtreat and not undertreat.
Let me say we've got good data to show that if we treat all women with breast cancer today, we cure some women who need to be cured, even though we cure those few women who don't need to be cured, and give them all the problems of the cure.
My husband's an anesthesiologist. There's a lot of danger in anesthesia, really a lot of danger.
So surgery is not without its risks.
Anesthesiologists will tell you upright that sometimes you don't wake up, and they don't know why. And who wants that kind of difficulty in your life? It's a big side effect. I think you could say that was really a major side effect, yes. I don't look at myself because it's so ugly, but it's done, so there we go.
"11 years later, 12 years coming up, I'm doing okay.
They said it was all a mistake, never should have happened.
I was skeptical, but they insisted that it needed to be removed. They took the whole breast.
We need better tests.
We need a better test.
This consumer update is brought to you by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Although the chances of being harmed by medical x-rays is extremely small, there is a slight increase in the chance of developing cancer later in life.
Mammogram is an x-ray of the breast. So next time you do another one, you're accumulating this radiation in your body.
It will accumulate toxins, and radiation is one of those toxins. It literally can convert in the tissues into heavy metals and certain things that are not conducive and not beneficial for our body.
Up to 15 years ago, I was a specialist for radiation protection. The breast is the most sensitive organ a woman has.
Radio sensitive?
Yes.
We can see that it definitely has a devastating / lethal effect on the body based on the amount of it that's present.
Most important are the free radicals.
So yeah, free radicals. Free radicals are bad news. It's like a byproduct, if you will, of toxicity. It's going to eventually impact the overall functionality of something else in there.
We don't stress developing new technologies nearly as much as I think we should. The technologies that I hear about are just different variances on mammography, analog to digital mammography, or film mammography to digital mammography, three-dimensional mammography. It's always something having to do with radiation.
The biggest change that's happened in mammography over the past 10 years is a type of mammogram called a 3D tomosynthesis mammography.
And yes, this is a new technology, new way of doing things. But we had best check this out before we just put it out there for generalized use. We don't know what other adverse effects, may come from the things that they're creating. Look at the technician. And the radiation technician, are they just coming out there in their swimming suit to be able to see you? No. If we did not know about accumulation, that tech would not be wearing that big leaded outfit. They would not come in there looking like automaton. They're putting on this big leaded outfit thing and standing behind a glass thing, and they're telling you, oh, this is perfectly fine for you.
Yes, there is a slightly higher dose of radiation than a regular 2D mammogram, but what we're able to do is we're able to tease apart the tissue, and we can find cancers at a much earlier phase and a much earlier size.
I reflect to Chernobyl and Fukushima. Let's reflect to those areas. And what happened? People died. Lots of people died. And they died in really uncomfortable ways. Of course, if you tell the public everything about something and certainly the dangers of a thing, the public is usually not going to agree to just go out there and, have a golden corral day and just eat as much of it as they can. They're not going to do it.
A 2D mammogram is slightly less than a 3D tomosynthesis mammography, but it's less than that which you get from flying across the country.
Oh, it's about the same amount as you would get from flying from here to New York. Okay.
This is, of course, nonsense, as you have to look at the local radiation burden and not at the whole body. And the local radiation is much higher than of the whole body, of course.
And one of the fallacies that people have is that, when you get a mammogram, it's such a high dose of radiation. But you just flew from Washington to here, and you got the same dose of radiation on a transcontinental flight as you get from a mammogram.
In my 15 years as doctor of nuclear medicine, I told it to every patient. He may say, oh, I'm so afraid of this method. No, you fly, you can have this radiology method.
Is it a rad?
No, it's not a rad.
If I have a high dense breast, I have to increase the amount of radiation in order to come through that tissue in order to distinguish this white accumulation, what is inside.
Do you think that that's a safe amount of radiation?
No, it's far from safe.
Larger breast women have to get more mammograms, more views.
I can believe it, which is more radiation, which is more injury, which is more inflammation.
Well, we know that younger breasts are denser, so that takes more radiation to penetrate them.
Do you know how much higher absorption for dense breasts?
Yes, at least 3 times, maybe 5 times.
Is it possible there's an increased cancer in dense breasts because they're increasing the radiation to the dense breasts?
Yes, this is a theory which is not proven up to now, but I think it is so.
Slowly I was able to see how crazy mainstream allopathic medicine is, how absolutely we're doing more damage than good.
Mammogram has lots of radiation.
The risk to induce a cancer is higher than to prevent a cancer if you make mammograms every year. This should no longer be done anymore.
Well, I don't think the controversy is totally ended. There are some people who say that mammography should start at 35. Some who say it should start at 40. Some who say it should start at 45. We at the ACS have taken a hybrid view, saying that women age 40 to 44 who want it should get it, but we recommend that all women start getting it at age 45. And then we recommend it annually from 45 to 54, and women should get it every 1 to 2 years from 55 onward. The issue that I really like to discuss is the fact that mammography is a suboptimal test.
In Switzerland, the radiation societies do no longer recommend mammography as a routine method, only in special questions.
Yay, go Switzerland. I mean, here we go, another place that does what? They have universal health care, nationalized health care. And we think that that's such a bad thing. No, it is actually based on prevention. And that's why they do it. It's based on not waiting for that tumor to blossom through your nipple before you deal with it. So good for Switzerland. And I really hope that the United States eventually gets on board with that and that we really get it.
What we're doing now is we're headed down the 3D mammogram.
Oh.
It's always something having to do with radiation.
We know that the industry is going into this new technology, and it's really cool, it's wonderful and all of that. And just because we can doesn't mean we need to. They're all in bed with each other. There's a big game there because there's a money game. If we know that an FDA guy now is one of the corporate people over on some drug company's board, what is that telling you? That's telling you a lot. When we're looking at introducing a technology into a system that is centered on not just healthcare and not just providing good care, but instead, how much money am I going to make?
Radiology and radiation, that comes with a price.
You start with maybe 48 years of age and go on until you are 80. The probability that you will get an induced cancer grows from 5% up to 20%.
If you do enough mammograms, you're going to get breast cancer.
Are you going to stop flying because you don't want to get that amount of radiation?
If a high energy X-ray goes into the body by 100%, 90% come out and 10% are a radiation load. If I have a low energy X-ray, 100% go in and maybe 40% come out and 60% are a radiation load. So the lower the energy, the higher the radiation load. Mammography is so dangerous.
So to me, it's a small risk for potential gain.
They cannot think that it may be harmful what they are doing. So they suppress all doubts and fill their subconsciousness, and the upper consciousness is clean. The body accumulates every radiation during the whole life. In the early times of radioactivity, the doctors all died from radioactivity burden. You have to take care of what kinds of radiation you expose your body, if it is really necessary or not. I don't understand my colleagues that they go such high risks without necessity.
I've always told my patients avoid the mammography merry-go-round. It's a lot of radiation exposure. It misses a lot.
It appears that women that get them die more often than women that don't. They published it in The Lancet, the most prestigious medical journal in the world. Women that get mammograms die more often than women that don't. Die. Not only are they not helpful,
we haven't saved breast cancer lives from it.
They cause cancer and cause death. Mammograms cause breast cancer, period. Let me repeat that again. Mammograms cause breast cancer.
If you don't want breast cancer, don't get a mammogram and don't go to the doctor. You know, so there's, yeah.
I'm not going to have my patients stop getting imaging because of radiation exposure, because if they're flying cross country.
When women realize that the information has not been full and fully disclosed, and indeed now they realize that it's in fact completely different from what they've been told, and that it is a harmful thing rather than a helpful thing, do you think that we would continue to choose to do that thing? Most of us, no.
I was the first Republican to sue tobacco. I was Attorney General all of the 90s. Disinformation is giving someone the wrong information. If the patient doesn't have all of the information that the patient should have in order to make an informed decision, that's just flat wrong.
Conventional medicine controls the information system. So what goes out, they totally control. And if they don't like what it says, then they're one of the first ones to either sit on it or redirect it over there or give it a different justification. But it really is all about justifying why they would need to use the different therapies that are being used, most of which are invasive. And we can definitely do things that are less invasive.
You can't understand medicine outside of religion. It is a belief system. They believe what they do because they've been indoctrinated. There's massive disinformation campaigns. The drug companies actually hire writers to create disinformation, to confuse people. But it's not the doctors. They're already totally indoctrinated.
Is it a rad?
No, it's not a rad.
It's the people that they want to keep confused, the consumers.
Confusion leads to nothing getting
Yes,
done.
paralyzes them. Yep.
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 Yeah, right, exactly. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to keep going down that same road because at least we know how to do that. You know, exactly. Until they figure it out. They'll figure it out eventually. I'm happy that there's controversy because at least there's discussion. No, we shall see.
What we want ultimately is for patients to be able to make informed decisions. Because what they do now is they just do whatever the doctor says. And why wouldn't they?
Unfortunately, based on any diagnosis where the C word comes out, the C word scares the heck out of most people, and they will run and jump off a cliff if they think that that's going to help them turn that all around.
That they could just make an awful lot of money on it, playing upon people's, desire to do anything, take any chance, so that they can live. That's pretty bad if you're playing upon that just to make more money.
We use this beautiful word, mammogram, but actually if we would tell our patients, go ahead and do an x-ray of the breast, probably, they will have a lot of questions after that.
The best of circumstances, when women get mammography, the studies show it decreases their risk of death by 20 to 30%. That means it does not benefit 70 to 80% of the women who need a test that saves their lives.
There are some cancers that basically hide from or are not easily detected with mammography. So we're always looking for something else. So I've always been interested in what could we use in addition to, or what could possibly replace or be an adjunct to mammography.
Thermography is an adjunctive test approved by FDA, a very safe, non-invasive, painless test.
One is totally hands-off. Thermography. You change the position of your body. The other is taking two metal plates and squeezing your breast tissue between them.
There's no radiation, there's no compression, there's no side effect whatsoever.
It's non-radiative, so it's cleaner, it's safer. It's actually better priced.
There is nothing touches you. There is no radiation.
No radiation.
It really is as easy as having your picture taken with a digital camera.
Thermography is just a camera, an infrared camera that detects heat coming off your body. And so nothing smashes you.
There is no squeezing of the breast.
No x-rays, no cancer causing anything. It's just a camera like this camera, except in infrared spectrum of light, heat. It's a test of physiology, a test of what's going on in the breast, not anatomy.
And this is the only test which can show us inflammation, lymphatic congestion, poor circulation, acute or chronic physiological condition.
Thermography is a heat signal. It's an infrared heat signal. So what it's doing is it's looking for areas of increased signal.
The toxic waste from those cancer cells cause a release of nitric oxide, and that releases heat. That's called thermal. So the thermal camera can detect that. Also, cancer cells to grow have to recruit blood supply. Hello, more blood flow is called heat.
Hello.
A mammogram is a test of anatomy. An MRI is a test of anatomy. Ultrasound is a test of anatomy. So it's important to look at those tests of anatomy. But that's only if you've already got a lump. What if we could detect it in that 6 or 7 year run-up, before it was 1 billion cells?
Thermography can see problems 8 to 10 years before we see a mess. 8 to 10 years, just think about it.
Here is something that is more efficient in terms of seeing some kind of imbalance in the tissue. That's really what you want to pick up first. Let's not wait until a cancer is formed and then go after that.
So honestly, this is a test of prevention.
I am not looking at this as the war on cancer. I'm looking at this as how do we as a society figure out what the root cause of cancers are and how do we prevent them from happening to begin with.
I would love to see even more prevention.
I had a patient come in my office one day who had been getting her mammogram religiously, and she found a very tiny cancer, and she was angry. And she said, I can't believe I got cancer. I get my mammogram every year. And I said, well, mammograms don't prevent breast cancer, but we know that they can prevent death from breast cancer. In dense-breasted women, we're always looking for something else that we could use as an adjunct.
Thermography is for women from age 20 and up. Age 35 and up is every year. Most women under the age of 35 who are diagnosed with breast cancer, they don't know because they're not getting any kind of structural imaging. They're not doing their self-exams. So when they're diagnosed, they're typically stage 3 or stage 4. And their diagnosis is pretty dismal. And so from age 20 to 35, thermography is once every 3 years. Even the younger women that are coming in are a TH3, which is a thermobiological score of 3, which is in the questionable range. We're always looking at the baseline, and then we look at the previous year and the current year. By monitoring year over year, what you're doing is you're able to see those changes as quickly as possible or as soon as possible, which is increased vascularity, hyperthermia, or signal irregularities. So the thermobiological score, TH score, is 1 through 5, and I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I have only seen 3 in the TH1 score. I've seen some of these, but not very many. Most everyone is in the questionable range, and we call it an epidemic of TH3s, especially over the last 15 to 20 years, just because of everything that we're exposed to. Our environment, xenoestrogens.
Lifestyle. Are they obese? Do they smoke? Do they drink? Do they exercise? Do they eat a healthy diet?
Our air, our water, our food, etc.
Fortunately, I do not see very many of the TH4s or the TH5s, which you can see are abnormal and severely abnormal.
Are those usually indicative of a tumor present?
Does not necessarily mean that a tumor has been formed.
But it might be forming?
Yes. It is inflammation in the breast. Last year, you had a TH3, which is be right about here, and then the other was actually a TH3 minus, which simply means it's mildly questionable versus questionable.
But those are not my breasts?
No.
That's good.
It is broken out between right breast and left breast, and starting off with the vascular asymmetry. And then it also indicates any signal irregularities and hyperthermia. On the right breast, obviously you see no significant findings there. And then on the left breast, there is a signal irregularity that is there. Signal irregularity, signal irregularity, signal irregularity. And all of that information is taken into account to determine your thermobiological score or your risk factor.
So in your case, I don't see any anatomical pathology in your breast, but to make sure that everything's okay, we're also going to look at your thermography pictures.
So we have these, your thermography films, and I also looked at your ultrasound films from Universal Medical Imaging. There should not be more than 0.3 degrees difference. And so that is your early warning sign. And so let's talk about what you do at that point. Do you have cancer? We don't know. We're not going to stick a needle in there and fish around for cancer cells for sure, or this doctor has it. Is there going to be a tumor there? Absolutely not. Remember, it's 7, 8, 10 years before a tumor shows up. So you might have some early cancer cells there.
This wasn't supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be part of the documentary.
The coolest thing is that when we detect that abnormality without mass present yet,
those are very reversible at that stage. Here's what that would look like to help you treat that.
If I have clients who have a thermobiological score that they are unhappy, with, it is recommended that they work with their doctors to figure out what they need to do. If there are some lifestyle changes that need to happen, make dietary changes, cutting out the junk food.
We can give naturopathic suggestion to a patient, can guide them through lifestyle and changes.
Hey!
Diet, hydration, or exercises, detox, and so on.
Every time you sit on the pot, put your hands on your breast and do circles. No, right, there you go, right over the nipples, full body, yeah.
All right.
And then go the other direction. What are you doing? You're creating blood flow. It's one of the things bras do. They decrease circulation of blood. That's called less oxygen, less nutrients. Does that sound healthy? Okay. And then by the same token, they create lymphatic congestion. Lymph carries trash away from the cells, so we're backing garbage up into the cells. Does that sound healthy?
No.
Okay. And then bras heat the breast. Breasts are made to be cooler. So we've got three things going on that bras are not healthy for. You're going to wear a bra less than 8 hours a day. And then whatever you do, don't sleep in one of those things.
We've been required to put those bras on and just get used to wearing something that is restrictive to the normal movement of a part of our body. And I know guys have attitudes about that too, and take the motion out of certain parts of their bodies as well.
Underwires are not good.
At least they know that the wired bras, that is actually causing an inflammatory change in our tissue, and thereby that would contribute to difficulties that we would subsequently have just based on a piece of apparel.
The less you wear them, the less likely you are to get breast cancer. The other thing that bras do, they decrease the bounce, and the bounce is actually good because it's a lymphatic pump.
Let them bounce,
Some women
ladies.
have that down to an art.
We're going to scan your right and left breast. In order to scan your right breast, I want you to keep your hand out. Okay. And we're going to look. If there is any abnormal structure, we can angle transducer to look from every aspect to analyze it.
There's no pain involved here, folks.
No, there is no pain, no squeezing, no radiation. It's very safe diagnostic test.
Ultrasounds are much more sensitive than mammograms.
And there are a lot of studies showing that mammogram can miss up to 40 to 60% of breast cancer.
Half of all cancers that actually exist.
If there is false positive result on mammogram,
terrible test, very insensitive test.
It's a chain reaction, okay? It leads to unnecessary, very expensive, very painful tests like biopsy.
It could be a benign fibrocystic process, or it could be the beginning of cancer, and because you don't know, that those would require a biopsy.
Takes you off of one road and turns you to another where there is repeated testing that now has to happen and repeated invasive therapies.
How about ultrasound? It's about 75, 80% sensitive, but that's 25% more than mammograms. You've got thermography. It's up to 92% sensitive if you've got a good camera and a good reader. So you can combine ultrasound and thermography. Now you're up above 95% sensitivity. Well, that's amazing. There's literally only a few doctors, maybe in the whole nation, that do ultrasounds and thermograms side by side. She is a doctor of ultrasonography, so she does the ultrasound right beside the thermogram.
We do thermography first, and then we project that picture on the big screen TV. We show them their body. We explain them what those colors mean, and they see where the problem is. And by looking at that picture immediately, I'm doing ultrasound, and if I see suspicious area on thermography, I pay more attention to that area on ultrasound. We have a sophisticated software which will measure temperature. And when we measure temperature, we will compare temperature of one nipple to the temperature of another nipple, the global breast to global breast, and we know what temperature is normal and what temperature is abnormal. One patient came and she said, my thermography is normal, but I feel that something is in my breast. And she didn't have abnormal temperature difference. But when I did an ultrasound, I immediately understood why. Because she had mass in her left and in her right breast. And that's why temperature was very high in both, and it was no difference.
That would have been missed by the thermogram. That would have been one of the 8 or 10% that the thermogram missed. That's why you combine it with the ultrasound.
Ultrasound will give you up to 90% accuracy, but a combination of thermography and ultrasound will give you up to 95 to 99% accuracy.
95% at least.
That's what we should be using. 95% sensitivity versus 50%. Do you have cancer? We don't know. But you might have some early cancer cells there. Those are very reversible at that stage.
We've actually seen them change. So, depending on what's going on with their health and what they're willing to do, some working on detoxification, changing their diet. We can actually see that have an impact. When I decided to become a thermographer, I was actually surprised to learn that there are no guidelines by the FDA. Years ago, mammography was not regulated. The FDA stepped in and set guidelines. It is FDA registered for medical use. It has been since 1982. but they don't actually regulate the offices and how the offices are run. Now, if you are advertising, marketing, where you're saying inappropriate things that thermography can do, then they certainly will, they will visit you.
One thing about thermography, though, is that I sometimes question the training of some of the people that do it, but that's with any kind of test.
So it's important to follow guidelines for getting accurate imaging, but just as important is making sure that the camera that you have and the person that is doing the interpretation are properly trained. The board-certified thermologist that we partner with has over 30 years experience in actually doing the interpretation, and the way that he got that experience was 3 years in an internship with Dr. William Hobbins, who is what we consider the grandfather of thermography in the U.S., a medical doctor that dedicated his life to it. It's really important to know that your thermographer is using someone that is properly trained and hasn't just been given a random course in how to interpret thermography. I am hoping that there will be a time that they will come in and they will regulate, because anyone that is doing thermography and not following appropriate protocols, guidelines, they are putting women's lives at risk, and we can't do that.
If you're going to use that equipment to actually ascertain whether or not someone has some kind of malignancy, we really want to have the latest and the greatest.
This is a potentially life-saving tool for women, and we need to do everything that we can to make sure that they have access to this.
Don't ask your doctor about a thermogram because they'll be clueless.
Many times they are rejected with their thermography images, saying like, why did you do that? It's a waste of money, a waste of time, or not enough information.
Doctors aren't used to looking at it.
Those people who are saying this is not familiar with this test.
I get the images and I get the reports. Now, I haven't been trained to read them.
My understanding before, back in the 90s, thermography was covered by insurance. It is not any longer by any insurance company that I'm aware of.
Thermogram has been seen over the years as more healing arts motivated tool, and so that again means that people are going to have to reach in their pockets and pay for it.
The only one that would cover it would be Aflac, a supplemental insurance for cancer, and it is also available through your flexible spending account.
Personally, I see a lot of mistakes. I see that some mammograms are false positive.
They said it was all a mistake.
And some of them are false negative.
False positive or false negative?
They didn't have mammograms, so you don't know.
I see patients after mammogram because a mammogram is abnormal and doctors say, oh, your mammogram is abnormal, go ahead and do an ultrasound. So why?
It's very unlikely that a mammogram will find a tumor if you have extremely dense breast tissue.
So why? Why we cannot do an ultrasound in the first place?
If you have fatty tissue with dense tissue or straight dense tissue like my wife Nancy had, you need an ultrasound. And don't let anybody talk you out of it.
You always get to have an ultrasound, no matter what happens. So why not go directly to the ultrasound and skip the mammogram, which is unpleasant, useless, and painful?
So why? Why do we need to radiate women first and then we do a more accurate test?
Mammogram is the standard.
It's the standard of care. So it's what we do.
Lawyers who sue are part of the problem. There's no question about that. That's why we have people doing tests that aren't needed and covering all their bases.
Real simple. That's why all these docs hide behind. It's not the standard protocol. They are covered from a lawsuit because it's not the standard protocol.
But usually you get the mammogram first and then the ultrasound.
Yes.
Mammography is absolutely the standard of care.
A mammogram is a screening study. Ultrasound is a diagnostic study. That's what ultrasound has been used for years, as a diagnostic tool, so that it's an adjunct.
It's almost as if the insurance companies decide methodology far more than the actual practitioners do.
We're still at the place where a mammogram is the standard.
These days, the docs are being paid by the pharmaceutical companies, so it's just absolute conflict of interest. And more often than not, that doc is being encouraged to prescribe this particular drug. Why? Because they're getting some kind of kickback. You know, they're being paid to prescribe that particular thing. There's money involved in it somewhere. Follow the dollars. Here's where integrity comes in. And do we choose to be integrous, or do we choose to set that aside and go for the money and toe that conventional line?
Thermography by itself clearly has been shown not to be useful.
But a combination of thermography and ultrasound will give you up to 95 to 99% accuracy.
Well, that's amazing.
Why we have to do this dangerous test if we can do just an ultrasound and thermography?
A hospital spends $1 million on this mammogram machine, so they want their return on their investment.
Thermography is a technology that actually came out of the 1970s and has been evaluated several times and has never really been shown to be beneficial.
People are blindly persuaded that just because it's a scientific article, that it is the truth. No, not true.
I never trust the literature.
Excellent clinical trial done by Laszlo Tabar in Scandinavia showed that women that got screening with early detection, they were able to actually get about a 40% decrease in death from breast cancer.
I never trust the literature.
I'm so glad that now, finally, after all these years, people are realizing that it's been money that has been driving the content of these particular articles based on who has paid them and what it is they want them to say. And so, yes, here again, conflict of interest.
Mammography is so dangerous.
That's just flat wrong.
We know that mammograms don't work. We know that the studies that were used to prove were fraudulent.
A lot of the research data, a lot of the professional articles that we've read have been manipulated for the sake of money and to support whatever major corporation might have funded them to actually do a negative study.
And the FDA actually did give it some approvals back in the 1980s or so that I think if the thermography went through the FDA today, it would not get those approvals.
Come on, colleagues. Let's get back to having practical sense behind some things and not allow ourselves to be a part of a system that we truly see is destructive. Why would we do that? There's a thing called karma. And when we know that we're out there doing harm, and one of the things we've promised not to do no harm.
To be on the right side, not to harm the patient.
If the patient doesn't have all of the information that the patient should have in order to make an informed decision, that's just flat wrong. I don't know that it's criminally illegal, but does it break the consumer protection laws ultimately? Probably does, yeah.
I was very hopeful years ago that, thermography was going to be able to come in and be a huge adjunct. It's not there yet.
I will say that if thermography is going to be useful, it would be useful with something else like ultrasound or with mammography or with MRI.
To me, what I want to see is that technology head-to-head with the imaging that we're currently using. Infrared imaging, it makes sense.
So start thinking, ladies. Think. We have the capability to think. Let's think about the therapies that we are being encouraged to do. Let's research them and look at the harm that could potentially come to ourselves before we agree to do it.
We have to change our way of diagnostics, and it is possible.
The onus is really ours. It's not the doc's.
We're receiving a lot of calls from patients saying that I really want to do an ultrasound, but my doctor wants me to do a mammogram first. I heard it's a lot of radiation. What should I do?
I would encourage people to talk to their attorney general about the lack of information to them as consumers of medical services. That's what attorneys general do, is they're looking at consumer protection. And then the Attorney General, if he or she's interested, can engage with the medical community, and maybe together they can work through protocols to improve it.
We believe that patients are supposed to have a choice. If patient understands that mammogram has lots of radiation, it's harmful to the body, patient can call us and say, that's what I want to do. It's my body, it's my health, it's my life. I don't want to have radiation. Really hope that all this non-invasive, very safe tests can be adopted by medical community to avoid radiation.
They made it spread more.
It showed no malignancy.
But it's done, so there we go.
We need to remember that there is no test available which is 100% accurate.
So there is no test that's 100%.
We need to combine two of those tests, physiological and anatomical, together at the same appointment time.
The only early detection for breast cancer is thermography. And the medical community needs to get with it, get on it, find out about it, start using it, because that's the only early detection.
I'd be interested in finding out more.
So how many have you had, do you think?
How many? Every year since I was about between 35 and 40 years old. 80. Which means about 40 of them. That's a lot. That's a lot.
I never had a mammogram, and I never will.
Hey, Meg. So I just talked to a very angry person at beep who just found out that I was getting an ultrasound instead of a mammogram, and she called me up to ream me a new asshole, basically. And I tried to explain your film to her, and she was not having any of it. She pretty much bawled me out and said she hopes your film isn't successful. It was not pretty. She didn't say anything about my ultrasound results. She just called up to offer me a mammogram. Yikes! I'm not sure I'm going to go through this again.
Women must have a conversation with their physician. And if you don't like what your physician is saying, be strong enough to move on to another physician. Because usually what happens is a physician is elevated to here, and then it's God, and then it's your mother.
If I have one of the lymphomas that I can actually cure, and I rarely use that 4-letter word, then in my world, that is the C word.
Yeah, I mean, other things are like, hello. You're the interim. I am. You're the interim. I'm interim. I'm nice to meet you. Hi. I'm a doctor filmmaker. I have to run. I have to get my phone. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. How'd it go today? It went very well. We're having to save our verdict.
She couldn't have run away from it.
Then I don't have to tell you anything.
Oh. If we just solely think about two metal plates and taking something that is tender and squeezing it between, I always equate that to having a similar test that would be for guys, where they'd have to put their testicles in between two metal plates and have something squeeze it so that they could take pictures. I think that would not be a very popular test.